Hello and welcome to Visions. My name is Emilia Bojovic, and today with us we have Professor MarikaVicziany, Director of Monash Asia Institute, the flagship of Asian Studies at Monash University. Professor Vicziany will tell us how she came to become head of such a significant institution that enjoys worldwide reputation in the academic sector. Professor, welcome to the program. Tell us a little bit about your background, your arrival in Australia in the 1950s from the post-war Germany.
Yes, well, we arrived in 1950 very dramatically in Perth, on our way to Melbourne, and then we were hoping to go on to Chile. And as we got to the southern tip of Albany, at the foot of Western Australia, we were told that the wharfies were on strike in Melbourne, and we were shipped back to Perth, and there I stayed for some decades until I went to do postgraduate research in Europe.
And what was Australia like in that period between 1950s and 1970s?
Well, you know, Australia in the 1950s was very much a white Australia society, but what people don't realise is there was also a terrific amount of discrimination against people from the European continent. So ours was a German, Hungarian-speaking family because my mother is half German and half Czech, and my father was from Hungary. So we spoke 3 languages at home, and the result of that was that there was a lot of discrimination against us, especially when all those movies came out about the Nazis, and anyone who spoke German, it was assumed, was an enemy of the world and world peace. So people forget that not only Aboriginal people and Indian and Chinese people suffered in the 50s and 60s, but so did Europeans who were not typically English or Scottish or Welsh or whatever, or Irish.
And why did you leave in Australia in 1970s and return 7 years later?
Well, I left Australia because the Vietnam War had really divided Australia. And I found it really very difficult to identify myself with a policy that was creating so much havoc and so much pain and such destruction in Southeast Asia. Of course, I also left because I got a scholarship to study in Germany. I went back to Germany to the University of Heidelberg, and after 2 years there went on to London. But had it not been for the Vietnam War, and the fact that a small minority of us felt very divided and separate from the general agreement with our engagement in Vietnam, maybe I wouldn't have accepted the scholarship. So for me, I left in protest against the Vietnam War. Okay.
Why Australian scholarship on Asia is a world class, and why you stayed here?
Yeah, well, the generation of the 60s, if you had academic ambitions, another reason for leaving Australia was to go to the best universities in the world, in Europe or in America. And that was because we really didn't have, at that stage in Australia, that Asian expertise. And so that was another reason for going. It was to be associated with a more prestigious university where you could do research and mix with the world's great scholars. But that's no longer true. These days we keep our best students, and at the Monash Asia Institute we have international students who come to us from Malaysia, from India, from China, from the Philippines. So Australia is now recognised as having world-class universities and world-class research. So it's not just undergraduate teaching, it's our capacity to do world-class research on the Asian region.
And do you find that now, whereas in the past you used to send students overseas to study at other universities, do you find now that you bring students from other countries in the world to Monash University, specifically to Monash Asia Institute, to pursue their studies here because it is a world-class university?
That's right, yeah. And it's world-class because we're close to Asia. We are actually, in my personal view, very much a part of the Asia-Pacific region. So we have wonderful relationships with universities in this area, with the academic and the media circles. We're able to do serious research on highly sensitive topics. You know, if we were American or European scholars, we would have to get special permission or research visas, whereas Australia's credibility is very high, and we don't have that kind of control on what we can and cannot do. And as you say, the result is that we're getting students now from Europe. For example, we teach with the European Union a Masters of International Humanitarian Action. The Europeans, to begin with, were always mainly interested in Africa. Now that they're interested in Asia, they're turning to Australian universities, including Monash, and they're sending out their best students to us to be retrained and develop those kind of linkages that we have with the Asia Pacific.
So what do you need to do as an institution to maintain the relationship with, I guess, the region, so to speak, to keep the status of the institution as high as it is, and to just maintain a good relationship so that it's, I'm assuming there's a lot of work involved in that.
Yeah, a lot of work, but of course it's fabulous work, wonderful work, creative. The critical thing is to develop good professional relationships and trust. So everything we publish, we fully acknowledge our co-authors. We make sure that our Asian colleagues in international publications are named as authors, whereas, I'm sorry to say, in a lot of countries in the world, the input from people doing the real research on the ground as collaborators, whether in Asia or in Africa, do not always get recognition. So we make sure that we collaborate in the full sense of the word, that these are co-productions, co-authorship, they're relationships built on intellectual exchange and built on the view that we have a lot to share. There's no of the old, shall we call it, colonial arrogance that we know more than you know. We can publish more easily because of our command of English, but there's no way that good research in the Asia Pacific can happen without talking and working very closely with people on the ground. Those people have to be acknowledged, and that's what we do. They keep us on our toes.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. We'll just have to take a break now. We'll take a short break. Please stay with us and we'll be back with more.